Seabird 9170. It's farewell from all of us here at Natson Heathrow Control Tower. The 747 has graced our skies for 25 years and we are truly sorry to see it go.
Air traffic control at Heathrow bid farewell to BA's last remaining 747 planes as they took off on their last flight before being retired. On board, the crew marked the end of an era.
Thanks for all your assistance over the years. It's been a pleasure and a privilege on behalf of all pilots and crew to fly this aircraft. It's with a heavy heart that we take this aircraft on its last flight. Thank you very much.
It's been a difficult day for the airline industry and historic in more ways than one. Easyjet has announced its first ever loss and says it's cutting flight numbers in the wake of coronavirus. Our editorial column says the industry clearly needs help.
Easyjet's disastrous loss of £845 million is a stark warning to the government that when you hesitate and offer false promises, the UK's industries will fall through the door. Only yesterday, ministers announced a task force to tackle airports and testing. It will not report back until November. Instead, a third of the government's resources are focused on Brexit, and the Prime Minister talks of plans 10 years ahead. We urgently need more serious, detailed, intelligent focus on the now and the forthcoming 18 months, not just wind farms for 2030.
Travel journalist Simon Calder joins me now. Simon, this EasyJet announcement is not a surprise, but it is still a bit of a shock to the system.
Well, EasyJet has made remarkable profits over the years, even when times have been tough. They've managed to, would you believe, make a profit every single year, which is something that very few airlines have managed to do. Now, unsurprisingly, for their financial year, which, bear in mind, really began October last year and continues until the end of September this year. Well, that is as good as it gets in terms of the current coronavirus problem. They actually had half the number of passengers, so it wasn't actually that bad. I mean, I imagine the next financial year is going to be far, far worse because it will include all of the effects of coronavirus. But notable that they repeated their call for an end to the endless changing of government restrictions and basically just said, right, government, you really got to help us out. It's effectively 6 months since the UK decided that the coronavirus meant the shutdown of aviation. And as a result of that, we have seen all kinds of miserable job forecasts and so on. And actually, if you don't need to go too far back, I mean, it's 4 months today since blanket quarantine was introduced, to the amazement of the world. Couldn't believe that Britain had lifted its very specifically targeted quarantine in the middle of the pandemic at its worst, and then put it back on when everything was getting better. But since then, it's just been, chopping and changing, lifting quarantine, putting quarantine back on, and in the process destroying all customer confidence. I mean, EasyJet didn't say, although I dare say one or two of them were thinking it, is if the government was doing its absolute best to destroy what genuinely was a world-class industry at the start of this year, then they are going exactly the right way about it.
They do seem to be hinting at looking for a government bailout. They wouldn't be the only airline looking for that, Simon. Is such a thing possible? Oh,
of course. I mean, look, the aviation industry has been sort of slightly muddled in its thinking. So had a twin track approach, and the whole of the travel industry really. It said, you've got to help us out financially because we're going through a really tough time, and just let us fly, we'll be all right. And those two messages are kind of slightly conflicting, and I dare say, the government has been able to kind of get away with a total lack of attention to the industry because, frankly, the list of demands was overwhelming. I think when the pressure starts to build will be obviously when we see thousands more very sad job losses, when all the government support systems run out, when we see perhaps one or two airports actually closing. I think the pressure will actually come from Tory backbenchers who are horrified about what's happening to their constituents, rather than anything that the airlines or the trade unions or the various trade associations say. The government has given every impression of being prepared to sacrifice the travel industry. The trouble is, a lot of people are saying, well, hang on, how much damage is international travel actually doing? And the answer seems to be, well, not very much. But hasn't stopped the government closing it down.
Today, BA retired its 747 fleet. I'm sure you've been on one or two of those planes in your time. How do you feel today, Simon?
Oh, exactly the same as I felt yesterday, which is that, of course, it democratized travel, but it started a revolution 50 years ago. That was when things became transformed, when suddenly the scale of passenger aircraft increased by 2.5 times and democratized travel in the process, because fares had to fall in order to fill all those extra seats. So it's sort of done all the heavy lifting, literally. It's now time for all the old 4-engine gas guzzlers to be broken up, which sadly the last 2 British Airways ones will be. And then the future is much quieter and much greener.